All right, On Course is the theme for our 2018 Living the Vision series. And what we're doing is attuning to the core purpose, attuning to the soul self, and then taking that inward direction, moving that inward direction into a more vivid expression, a more powerful actualizing of our potential in this life. Now, our focus has been upon 5 pathways for empowering the possible, and we've accomplished 3. We've gone through 3 of them: visioning, claiming, and last week Joshua did a wonderful work with initiating, and then that brings us to the 4th pathway today, celebrating. Now, celebrating is not just partying, although, there's nothing too much wrong with a little of that, Celebrating, on the other hand, is a very powerful, a profoundly powerful spiritual practice. Celebrating at its core brings us into the deeper spiritual energies and empowers us and takes us right to the creative core of the divine. I think that's probably why in the Bible it says if we didn't rejoice, the very rocks and hills would break out singing. Life is this miracle and this joy, and we tend to just drag ourselves through it. And I also love that it's declared, this is the day. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. But sometimes we can just live our lives in doldrums, I think, and just drag ourselves through it. And why would we want to do that? Mary Oliver asked the great question, are you breathing just a little and calling it life? Oh, we take it in and we go for it. Love the story of this man. He was sitting in his living room talking with his wife, and they were watching some TV. And at one point he looked at her and he said, just so you know, I never want to live in a vegetative state dependent on some machine. If that ever happens, just pull the plug. With that, she leaped up and ran over to the television and pulled the plug. So easy to lapse into vegetative states. And yet I love that, I think it was St. Irenaeus who said, the glory of God is a human being fully alive. Fully alive. There's a simple message today. Remember, celebrating is a power stance in life. Celebrating is a power stance in life. Really, our celebrating anchors all that's come forth through our visioning and our claiming and our initiating it, anchors it and moves us into a stance of power. And I want to share with you today 5 power stances of celebrating. 5 power stances. And the first one is celebrating higher ground. It is a powerful stance, no matter what's going on around us, to celebrate higher ground. No matter the lower states of things, no matter how the discord and the disruption or the upset or the chaos of humanity, still we can celebrate that there's higher ground. We don't turn our heads from what needs repair in our lives or in the world, and yet there is always that higher ground. And we must not be taken in by the blare and the din of all of the voices of disdain or anger or venom or discouragement. We're called to go to a higher place, and we celebrate that there is that higher place, no matter what's going on. And in that higher place, we gain a resilience and a broader perspective of things. So I'm calling us today to stake our claim on something higher in life so that we don't lose a sense of it and its power in our experience. That we stake our claim to the ultimate love and unity and peace and goodness of life itself in us and in all of creation. So maybe today, is it time for you to reclaim your higher ground? To climb to that greater place and stand and feel the power of that stance, celebrating higher ground no matter what's going on. When I was reflecting this week that 41 years ago, when I was just a year into the ministry, I hit a low. I was working really hard and probably working too hard. Have you ever had that experience where you're just sort of sabotaging yourself by overdoing it? And that's me. And I was feeling discouraged and down, kind of doubting myself and my abilities. And it wasn't a very good place because I knew I was disconnected with my power. So I called up a mentor minister that had retired to a little community across the Columbia River in Camas, Washington. And he was joyfully inviting me to come up there. And so I drove up to see Dr. Ezra Ellis. I've shared a little bit about him in the past. Beautiful man, sparkling eyes, and a wonderful smile greeted me when I arrived. And Ez took me in, we had some iced tea, and then finally I had the opening, and I said, Ez, I'm struggling. I'm down on myself. I just don't know. I'm working hard. I'm not always seeing the results of what I'm doing, and I'm losing faith in my abilities. I feel weak. And Ez just looked at me with that kind of compassion that I could just feel. And he says, you know what I think we ought to do? He says, Raj, if you'll just sit back in that easy chair there, take some deep breaths and close your eyes and just be silent for a few minutes. And I want to share with you one of my favorite passages. So I did that. And after a few minutes of rich silence, I heard Ez's beautiful voice declare this, and I want you to hear it too. Have you not known, have you not heard that the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth, faints not, neither is weary? He gives power to the faint, and to them that have no might, he increases strength. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. And I felt that just searing to the core of me. In a little bit, I opened my eyes, and it says, you know where that came from? And I said, well, Isaiah, I think. And he was pleased that I knew. And he said, you know, Raj, this is what you got to practice. And he proceeded to give me a formula I've never forgotten. He said, get still and be quiet more often. Don't we need to do that nowadays? Get still and be quiet more often. Turn from your struggles and be still. Be still and know, it says. And turn from your own self-judgment and your own ego, because they bring confusion, if anything. And then he said, and as you're being still, then deeply commune. Be like a dry sponge, sensing that you're just absorbing the mighty presence of the living Spirit. Just commune with that and feel it going to the core of your being. It's as though you're standing in a light you didn't create, and yet it shines always right where you are. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, Raj, what you need is not more personal power. You need to remember to let the divine power flow through you. And you know, if you're feeling tired, discouraged, listless, you don't need more personal power. You need to get back in touch with the divine power that's right where you are and let it move through you. And then thirdly, he said, and then what you get to do is just celebrate your life. And I'll never forget that. He said, celebrate your life. He said, that's what it means when he says, mount up with wings as eagles. Celebrate your life. In that moment, I had a spiritual healing. The kind of spiritual healing that I think proliferates in this place and in this teaching. Really, I went to higher ground. And we can do that, every one of us. I was thinking also this week about His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and meeting him 3 times. And every time that I was with him, he would enter the room giggling and in joy, smiling and laughing. And not because he's a frivolous individual. He's a deep, powerful, spiritual light. And I thought about that and how it was as a teen. He had to flee Tibet as the Chinese were overrunning it, and then watch from afar as a cultural and human genocide unfolded. And yet, he could have this inner joy. And he could talk about compassion and having a smile. And he could talk about his friends, the Chinese, as we talk about our friends, Westboro Baptist. And he could talk like that. And I thought, somehow, through it all, he found his higher ground. And he refused to let the conditions tear him down. It's celebrating higher ground, whatever's going on. And if we're down in the lowlands, we get to climb up to that higher ground. But there is a way, as I've shared. Here in June 22nd, I'm so delighted that a dear friend of His Holiness, Pico Iyer, is going to be here. He's done a phenomenal TED Talk. He's got books out galore, and he's a phenomenal guy. He was born in England to Indian parents. Then he was raised in California. Then he spent a lot of time living in New York, and now he lives in Japan. Gets around. But you see, the reason he does is that he is an acclaimed writer of travel material. And that's what he did. He wrote about his travels and about journeying around the planet until he got to a point where he discovered that the real travel for us, the most important travel, is the travel inward. And I hope you don't miss him. He's so deep and rich, and he's such a beautiful person. His new focus, he says, is to remember that our happiness, our clarity, and our ability to be attentive and to benefit ourselves and the world really is dependent on building that stillness into our days, to slow down a little and travel in. Travel can get you sights, but silence gives you insights. In silence, we can step back, and eternity comes into our lives. All of this to encourage us to remember that it's a power stance to be celebrating higher ground. And secondly, it's a power stance to be celebrating empowered choosing. Empowered choosing, one of the most sacred aspects of your life and mine and of all conscious human beings is our ability to be self-reflective, to think freely, and to choose. To choose. Now, a lot of our choosing is a lot of old habitual choices, choosing us, choosing our thoughts, choosing our actions, but we do have always the opportunity to exercise deliberate, transformational choosing. And it is so powerful. Sometimes even when it looks like things are too difficult, too complex, convoluted, still the power rests in a choice. And it can overcome everything. I'm thinking of Viktor Frankl, the great psychologist who found himself in the horrors of the Nazi concentration camp and discovering that there was something they could not take away from him. And it was his power to choose his attitude and his consciousness and what he would think and what he would value. So no matter what you face, it's not as difficult as that. You can choose. And your choice is your ticket. Celebrate that power of choice. So we're having our friends Westboro here today, perhaps, and I was interested to watch a TED Talk of one of the granddaughters of Fred Phelps, the founder, who passed a couple of years ago, speaking about how she and a sister finally exited out of the Westboro experience that some would call a cult. And she said, I was a blue-eyed, chubby-cheeked 5-year-old when I joined my family on the picket line for the first time. My mom told me to leave my dolls in the minivan. I'd stand on a street corner in the heavy Kansas humidity, surrounded by a few dozen relatives, with my tiny fists clutching a sign that I couldn't read yet. It said, gays are worthy of death. This was the beginning. And here's a picture of her nowadays. And so protests for her as a little girl and as a young girl became a daily occurrence. She was deeply conditioned to believe that they were in a battle, a spiritual battle between good and evil. And she says, the good was my church and its members, and the evil was everyone else. She did this because that was how she was raised and what her family did for 20 years. But interestingly, in part due to her getting involved with Twitter exchanges, things began to shift and move for her inwardly. She began to have powerful, spirited conversations with people about their views, and yet she said they were civil. And she began to experience the other, as she calls it, meaning she began to have an experience of other people differently than what she was told about them. And in fact, some of the people she would engage with on Twitter would actually come out to see her whenever she was picketing in their towns, including one Jewish man who ran a Jewish organization. And of course, they hate Jews, but yet he persisted in making connection with her. And finally, she started to see the boundary between friend and foe beginning to be blurred. And it was unavoidable for her to begin to see all of the others out there as human beings and not demons, as she had been taught. And so these realizations built up, and she could not ignore them until finally in 2012, she and a sister made the most terrifically fearsome and difficult decision, and that was to leave their family. And once she did that, she knew she'd never be seen, she'd never see them again, they would never allow it, and she left. And she began then on a journey, and what touched her so much was how others she had been communicating with took her in when she'd been thrown out or left. They took her in, including a Jewish family that let her sleep on the couch and fed her during that time. And she says, I began to listen and learn. And then she wrote an in-depth apology for the pain she had caused, especially to families who were conducting memorial services for their slain servicemen, and they protest those funerals. And she saw how horrific that is and apologized for it and was moved by how much forgiveness came her way. You see, we can make a transformational choice. And we can open, we can learn, and we can listen. She has some interesting things to say about our country right now. We celebrate tolerance and diversity more than at any time in memory, and still we grow more and more divided. Isn't that so? We want good things: justice, equality, freedom, dignity, prosperity. But the path we've chosen looks so much like the one I walked away from. We've broken the world into us and them, only emerging from our bunkers long enough to lob rhetorical grenades at the other camp. I remember this path. It will not take us where we want to go. What gives me hope is that we can do something about this. We have to talk and listen with people we disagree with. Let me say that again. We have to talk and listen to people we disagree with. And she concludes, we just have to decide that it's going to start with us. There's that choice. She made it. We can too. Celebrating empowered choice, and then celebrating emerging vision. To celebrate a vision is to stand by it. You know, when you cast a vision for your life, it does not automatically come into full expression. And so we got to keep celebrating that high vision. We got to keep celebrating it and championing it and reminding it, celebrating the little steps of fulfillment along the way. But even if the going gets tough, we stand. We continue to celebrate that emerging vision. It's that celebration that continues to make it a reality within ourselves. And I tell you what, whatever is a reality within you will soon become an experience in your outer world and on your path of experience. But we got to keep celebrating it. Keep championing that vision. Always love the words of James Allen. The vision that you glorify in your mind, the ideal that you enthrone in your heart, this you will build your life by. This you will become. That vision. Yeah, it's about celebrating emerging vision. The fourth power stance of celebrating is celebrating authentic heart. Oh, to be celebrants of the action of love and of heart, wherever anyone takes the risk to be vulnerable enough to just be a presence of love. To go beyond the hesitation or the embarrassment or whatever the case, the vulnerability, and still be that love that the world so desperately seeks. To celebrate that. To celebrate that even when we see hate being expressed. But to be a celebrant of love is to go to the highest place and align yourself with the highest energy. A while back, a number of years ago, I shared with you about a man who has since passed. His name's Johnny Barnes. And Johnny was born in Bermuda in 1924. He passed over in 2016. He started his life as an electrician until the railroad he worked on closed in 1948, and then he became a bus driver. But in 1986, he did something new. He would stop at a roundabout called Crow Lane Roundabout there in Bermuda. And he began every day waving to traffic, blowing kisses, and telling everybody, "Good morning, I love you." Now, he did this for 30 years until his passing. Rain or shine, from 3:40 a.m. to 10 a.m. And he became an institution. He's beloved by all who live there. They call him Mr. Happy. And here's a picture of him by a life-size bronze statue that they erected in his honor. There are documentaries about him. He's known throughout the world. In fact, the police would often get frantic calls when he wasn't at his official spot on certain days. I love what he said before he left this plane. "I am just a little instrument in the hands of God to be used any way he sees fit. From 3:40 a.m., I stand on the corner and greet people and let them know that life is sweet and life is beautiful. No matter what happens in life, it's always sweet to be alive, to enjoy the sunshine and the flowers and the birds. The good Lord and I are just trying to make people happy. We human beings got to learn to love one another. One of the greatest joys that can come to an individual is when you're doing something that is helping another." God bless Johnny Barnes, who knew about the power of celebrating authentic heart. It's in every one of us, you know. And finally, the power stance of celebrating is celebrating boundless beauty. As Johnny spoke, life is so sweet. Life is so sacred. And sometimes we let our own troubles or the troubles of the world dim our vision of the glory of it all. We're in the midst of a mighty, phenomenal miracle on this planet. An absolute miracle. And every one of you is an absolute miracle. Abundantly a miracle. So it's to savor the glory of it all, the beauty of it all. That's a power stance in this life. Never let the struggles and the darkness overwhelm the truth of the prevailing beauty of it all. And to be in touch with that, sensitized to the beauty in nature, the beauty in art, in people, in all sentient beings, and to revel in that. And I got to tell you, I revel in the beauty of Mile High Church, this incredible spiritual community. Have you paused to reflect on how beautiful it is? It's decades and decades of tradition and what we've created together and the way we reach out and we're known everywhere. And the work we do with people and our kids. And the way we blend the faiths and teach people how to live. Isn't it incredibly beautiful that we have? Let's not miss that beauty. That beauty matters. Next Sunday we'll have an opportunity to step into that and to commit to that and share how we're going to support this wonderful spiritual community in the upcoming budget year. I think that's a sacred opportunity to be a part of the boundless beauty of Mile High. Oh, Elizabeth Barrett Browning once said, "Earth's crammed with heaven and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit around and pluck blackberries." Let's not miss it. Let's not miss the beauty. So you see, there are power stances in celebrating. Celebrating higher ground, empowered choosing, emerging vision, authentic heart, and boundless beauty. I invite us all to step forth as celebrants of all that is highest and finest in us and around us. And I tell you what, just try it. Wherever you are, whatever's going on, just try it. And I promise you, you'll move from desperation to celebration, and then you'll become a revelation. of so much of the good of God. And I bless you in that.